here I am getting my mic ready. Almost forgot it. Almost forgot to put my mic in front of my face. Hello, Madfinger, Meandering Mystic, Tote, and Jasmine. Warm greetings to you all. It's kind of weird to have my mic right in front of my face here. There we go. That should be a little better. Hello, Mari, and good afternoon, because I'm quite sure it's after. I guess it's afternoon where you are. Hello, Tamu. Glad the ladies are arriving. Just let me grab a book. I want to show it at some point. Hello, Foxadre. Hello, Soul Travel. This is a book that was written in 1987. The Chalice and the Blade by Riane Eisler. I'll talk about it in a little bit. Because of the importance. And recently I... excuse me. There's... excuse me. Wow. There's a chief, a Native American chief by the name of Oren Lyons. And I've known about him for a long time now. Probably about 20 years or close to it. And he belongs to the Onondaga tribe, which is part of the Iroquois tribe, or the Haudenosaunee as they call themselves, which means people of the Longhouse. And he's been an eloquent speaker for decades now. Spoken at the UN, and there's a video that's a couple of years old now, at least a couple of years old, maybe 4. I'm well enough, Mari. Hello, not today. And but with one of the tie-ins between this video, and if I can, I'll find the link. I'll drop it in here. I have to kind of take my attention away, but I want to get started. And it really, what Oren Lyons speaks about before the coming of the Europeans, and what Riane Eisler speaks about is the role that women played prior to sky gods, in the case of Riane Eisler, and then when those sky gods kind of got more refined and became put into the one Yahweh character, who the Gnostics identified as the demiurge. And but the role that women, very important role that women played, and largely as the holders of the wisdom. And Chief Oren Lyons lays it out very well that they practiced a very advanced form of democracy, where every voice was heard, but wisdom was able to prevail. I think it's Isaac Asimov who has a quote that says, democracy, Western democracy means that your ignorance is equal to my knowledge. And to think that everybody is well informed rather than just having an opinion, because everybody has an opinion, even if they don't have facts. Even if they don't have the capacity to process those facts, they will have an opinion. And democracy allows for those opinions to turn into representatives. And another thing that Chief Oren Lyons, spoke about is how everybody in the tribal situation, and in this case it was a confederacy. What started out as the 5 nations became the 6 nations. The last group to join was the Tuscarora. The original 5 were the Mohawk, the Onondaga, the Oneida, the Seneca, and the Cayuga. And from what I know of, my father was born in that part of the country, and Chief Oren Lyons reminds me so much of my father, facial morphology. My father also had very straight, blackish, dark brown hair, broad face, high cheekbones. That's kind of where I got it. Although my mother had high cheekbones because she had a Nez Perce great-grandmother. And so it's a really, I really should get up and put it in a live chat so that, because I don't no need to put it in the description. It's recommended listening. Because within our kind of circuit, the material that gets listened to isn't really very helpful. It's very entertaining. It might have nuggets. It might have diamonds. If you go through a sewage system, you'll find all kinds of valuable things in amongst the muck that accidentally got flushed or something. And then there's Rianne Osler, and one of the things that she points out when hello Windsor, with how the settlements that are found prior to the marauding, what she kind of labels the Kurgan, the people who came out of the Russian steppes, or the Eurasian steppes, with their storm gods and their off-planet gods. I mean, the big thing is when people, the original people, and the indigenous people of Europe, and basically all over the world, it was an earth-centered reverence. And the marauders always represented an off-planet, or at least in the sky, at least an atmospheric, minimally, an atmospheric presence, rather than the earth where they caught the fish and gathered the crops, and whether they even hunter-gatherers before agriculture. But even once agriculture kicked in, it was still the earth that provided, and this was core to everything. And one of the things she remarked upon the indigenous people of Europe, is how the settlements were not fortified. They were often laid out where it was optimal for water, for wintering, and also the views, where to live there was to live within the beauty of this earth, to actually visually be able to apprehend and delight in the absolute beauty of this earth. And the reason why they were built like that was because before this fuckery began, where useful metals that weren't come by necessarily easily, and sometimes to make bronze, tin only has a few sources in the world. Copper is plentiful, but obviously this trade was there, and this trade was used to make tools, things that we could use for life. And one of the signs between the earth-based religions and the sky-based religions is sky-based religions use those same skills to make weapons, to go marauding. But in these more ancient times, you did not see, you know, like you see now castles on almost inaccessible places. They didn't build, before the fuckery began, they didn't build in inaccessible places. They built in beautiful places. They built in places they built paradises. And that's another thing, is that the original people, the way we originally did it was we lived in an earthly paradise, and we could enjoy life now and not endure some possibly very miserable life for the gift of heaven after. And heaven, like even with, that's heavenly. That's an insertion. Where what is sublime is heavenly rather than earthly, rather than paradisical, which implies earth. I mean, even in Genesis, where's paradise? It's on earth. Hello, Callan. And when I look at the brouhaha, the emotional maelstrom of the Supreme Court hearings, you know, Kavanaugh and all the rest of that, Blasey Ford, that maelstrom, that brouhaha. You know, I mean, there's, you know, Kavanaugh has a record of voting certain ways, like especially for surveillance, makes him pretty undesirable. That wasn't brought forward. Instead, there was this victim playing. And one of the things that I realize is that the victimization of women, the subordination of women, began first when these marauding people came about, and then suddenly peaceful people had to gear up for war. They had to turn farm implements into weapons for defense, a defense that hitherto had not been needed. But when we move into the modern world, and we see, you know, women reacting to their lack of power, their disempowerment, their second-class citizen status, and in you know, certainly in many ways, and in certain parts of the world, absolutely. What we don't hear is the disconnect from me of expecting to have respect for a woman when we still have the major religions the way we have them. The fact that many of these people, they might be atheists, but there are plenty of them that still belong to some form of the monotheistic faiths, which is the absolute source material for the subjugation and disempowerment of women. My last stream last week, Sanity and Sanitation, apparently was not well received. I got probably the most thumbs down in a while, although by the end of the show I'd already had 3 thumbs down. Apparently there are certain people who visit me, and some of those thumbs down, this might be because I will mention John Lamb Lash in a positive fashion. And the reason I do that is because he's the source of recovering a very important mythos. And they're not interested in the mythos. They're not interested in freedom. Their buttons got pressed because he might be this or that. He might have said something they consider racist. And one of the topics I discussed last week, and I did have one thing wrong. I said that John doesn't use the word race. He doesn't use the word the human being. He does use the word race, and if I had a chance, he's been very busy. Nemeta's getting set up, and they're doing a great job with it. But race implies competition, and competition is a Darwinian concept, the survival of the fittest, rather than, you know, You will either fit in really well or you will become obsolete. It's not like this battle. It's not a race. It's you bring your goods, and how good are your goods? And natural selection is not a competition. It's, there are expressions, and certain expressions are more advantageous than others, but it's not a competition. It's not a race. So anyway, yeah, I had my most thumbs down in a while, and I didn't think it was I didn't think it was one of my greatest shows, but I didn't think it was, I could see, thinking, he doesn't get a thumbs up for that. But there just seemed to be disapproval. And I really do think some of the disapproval just has to come with me giving homage to John Lamb Lash for putting together the Sophianic narrative, of retrieving it out of, from the pieces scattered through the Nag Hammadi texts, and putting it into a coherent whole, and taking out the gift that the human animal has as shamans, the shamanistic ability, the ability to enter into the dream time and recover information, to be able to have a bunch of pieces that still need some knitting, and to be able to go to the space where you can find the yarn that you require. I don't know if, hello, Julie Holland. Oh, a Telestic. Very good. Very happy to see that. And I'm not sure if I think I greeted you, Soul Traveler. If not, hello. I think I've greeted everybody. Good to see you, Foxadre. And today is the new moon, but on the first day of the new moon, so it's generally the crescent is not observable. Next day or two, we should know. And Foxadre has been really, really ace in his celestics, and I so welcome all your celestic input here, Foxadre. And I will get to my little topic of understand and comprehend. Oh, Tamu, happy birthday. Thank So, and of course, along with the subjugation and absolute trashing as full humans, the female gender, the monotheisms, again, also have within their narrative that our role is not to enjoy this earth, but to obey laws that came from heaven. And the subconscious implant of we're fallen, we're sinful. Once again, that just that the being claiming creatorship, and again, I don't call the demiurge the father of lies for nothing. Seems to have done a really shit job of creation. When you think of a being that wants to lay claim to being a creator, even forgot, and then in the creatorship even forgot that he doesn't really like penises that have hoods on them. So so when he finally got a chance, he talked to Abraham. Hey, we got to get rid of that extra piece there. But of course, that was also part of the blood contract. So, but I want to kind of keeping it topical with the disempowerment of women. Centuries, a few millennia, maybe a few millennia. And that's the other thing. One of the other more important channels on YouTube is New Earth, because it looks at the falsification of history, at the timeline, the chronology, how distant or not distant certain events were. And part of the corruption of that timeline is also when these various, when Judaism, Christianity, or Islam showed up on the timeline. And Buddhism, I'm not impressed with Buddhism because, first of all, Siddhartha came from a ruling family, possibly during a time when they weren't despots. But when you kind of look at it, the whole thing was suffering is part of life. And suffering, the real suffering in life comes from having rulers. It's not from having rules amongst ourselves, but it's from having rulers. And of course, what's the Greek word for rulers? Archons. And of course, archons are very distorted, because David Icke has taken it upon himself to be one of the main voices of them, and he's got it wrong. I think Wayne Dyer's another one who's made a bit of a career on it. And each one of them are kind of known for their interpretations. Not one of them really makes mention that the term was not even in our lexicon until John Lamb Lash reinserted it. Elaine Pagels, one of the first Christian scholars to look at the Nag Hammadi text, completely avoided this subject. So, the average understanding of what the archons are and why it's worth being aware of. Again, it's not anything to be alarmed about. You need to be aware of, because if to not be aware is to not be able to realize how a virus works. It's like being immuno-incompetent. It's like having a lazy immune system, where bacteria and viruses can have their way with your body because you don't recognize them as viruses. We do not recognize them as viruses or the pathogens that they are. And viruses are particularly important because viruses can't replicate. The only way they can do that is to bypass the defense of cells and then go, here's a little DNA package. Why don't you make some more of this? And that's kind of what has happened with the mind virus monotheisms, is that they propagate. And then once they've propagated enough, it's convert or die. It wasn't like the pagan world where everybody just kind of, had their own relationship with the earth and were on about, their locale, their community. It wasn't until heaven intruded that what your relationship was to reality, to existence, to the cosmos, to the galaxy, became something to kill for. And the native, for those who, if you're in Australia, you have an indigenous people who, and there are the ones who've really not integrated well, still have a solid connection. And people like Chief Warren Lyons, and part of that is because their confederacy was able to stay together. They've been able to hold their traditions, at least the memory of them, bettered. They've been able to secure them. And then there was a short 8-minute clip I saw today on Minds.com, and it was about Native Americans, the indigenous people of America, and speaking about, you know, how there was this policy. I don't know, you know, the exact date of it, but, you know, when all the children were pulled out of the tribes and brought to Christian boarding schools, so that they could never really get the myths and the traditions, and instead were told about the sinning little beings they were. And just the, you know, the idea that one group thinks it can take the children from another group, how sick is that? And again, these were pious people. These were pious people of their religion doing this. So what is it that, you know, that kind of, to me, that informs us how pathological the system that they represent is. It isn't about picking on individual people. It's about the system that they choose to represent. And it's a choice. As an adult, at least, it's a choice. Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, trauma is a big subject that is front and center in the conversations, and I'll use that word, conversation, especially, you know, in the Western societies. And in America, how about the trauma of the people who lived in this land first? What about their trauma? And that's, you know, and that's one of the things also. I mean, when was the last person who ran for president, ran for Congress, or any of these things that said, you know what, we need to make it right with the original people here? You know, it's not, you know, the whole thing is basically, how about maybe we listen to how they lived? Maybe we could learn something from these people. Especially since, you know, they've had a taste of technology, can know the good from the bad, but so maybe now, especially now, since they've found certain ways of adapting, and they're now trying to recover their roots. One of the women who was talking about it was saying how she had a grandmother who speaks Ojibwe. You know, Ojibwe was her first language. And how her mother, the woman who was speaking, her mother, could not speak Ojibwe. She could understand it, but she couldn't speak it. And then the young lady speaking, who now has a daughter, a granddaughter for her grandmother, can't speak or understand Ojibwe. But the beauty is her grandmother, still being alive, is teaching this young woman's daughter to speak and understand Ojibwe. So now, after 2 generations of loss of the language and the culture that informs that language, now somebody, you know, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, whatever it is now learning the language and will be able to speak it. And this is a kind of a renaissance of the indigenous people. The fact that there still are enough of the original people who remember their language, remember their myths, that can then now have the most formative stage of when you're really kind of, you know, kind of coming out of that, the awe with the AWE, the autism of, you know, before you kind of fully integrate into your body and into the systems and whatever, and being able to give them a different stream of information and how to be on this earth. And then the other thing with, you know, what happens with traumatized people is you get what is known as Stockholm Syndrome, where you identify with your oppressor. And again, that has definitely happened amongst the native people, not all of them, but a large portion of them in their trauma develop Stockholm Syndrome. So they become Christians. They think going to these schools is that, they'll get ahead in the world that was imposed upon them. And it's not like they have their world they can return to, at least not right now. And the Western world has done such a poor job. I mean, this modern technocracy, the political experiments, we got rid of the nasty kings and queens and replaced it with what? I mean, good riddance to kings and queens. At least of his historical period. With their divine right to rule. And their concept of divine was heaven, not earth. And it was about obey. At the bottom line of the monotheisms, the message to humans is obey. Remember that movie, I think They or Them, where that wrestler is Roddy Piper, I think his name was, and he puts on the glasses and everywhere it says obey, do this. That is the monotheistic system, and that system is what formed. I mean, the politics. One time you could, why did they separate church and state? To make it appear that we had broken away. But at that point, it didn't make a difference that we broke away from the church, because the church had formed our way of apprehending, of comprehending our who we thought we were. That they didn't need the church anymore. The politics was the new church. They live. Thank you, meandering. And in many ways, movies like They Live and Idiocracy turn out to be documentaries for all intents and purposes. So this is maybe where I'll kind of break out of that place I just was and get into comprehend or understand. Maybe I'll just quickly Google comprehend so I get some word roots. Because as anybody who's learned a little bit about legal fuckery, and legal fuckery is all part of our legal system, completely derives from the law and the obey system. Kind of started by Moses, but also Hammurabi was historically the first, and Hammurabi was a one-horn Anunnaki. They had those different little look like horns on there, and according to their rank, well, he was only a one-horn Anunnaki, but his code, Hammurabi's code, which is so celebrated, is the first systems of laws, which means the first system of oppression, first system, kind of the organized system of how the ruled should interact with the rulers. Oh. Dude. I forget that my transition is my C key. And so when I hit comprehend, when I hit C, that picture came up, so I'll have to be careful about my typing, or maybe take that hotkey out. I'm back. And understand, in its legal implication, is very creepy. You know, when they read you a bunch of their fuckery, and then they ask you, do you understand? They're asking, do you stand under what we just told you you need to stand under? And then, of course, they have your consent when you say, I understand. You know, they just read, you know, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. Do you realize that you did this? You did, according to our laws, you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and then the repercussions are this, this, and this. Do you understand? That's where they grab your consent. So in a legal setting, it's high fuckery. But then I was thinking about it in a more organic thing. You know, it seemed kind of reasonable if you say something, and you ask somebody, do you understand? Well, you're asking them to stand under a comprehension. You're asking them basically to stand. Stand isn't really implying any movement. It's not dynamic. So in many ways, that stance is one you're supposed to hold. In other words, there's no room for further comprehension. So let's see if I can get like a word root or two here. But okay, so to grasp the nature, significance, or meaning of. To contain or hold within total scope, significance, or amount. And I'm looking. Okay, that kind of stunk. As far as trying to, usually, you know, they'll break it down like what calm means, prehend. Okay. So basically, comprehend or comprehender comes from prehender, which means to seize or to grasp. And so that's when, if you would ask somebody, do you comprehend, is do you grasp it? And that's why sometimes for me, there's comprehension and there's apprehension. Hello, sunshine on Sophia. That's another aspect. I mean, apprehension means you have really grasped it, as opposed to comprehend is a little softer. It means the same thing, but apprehend is the real thing. But by using the word understand, it really just means somebody has said something, and whether you comprehend it or not, you'll stand under it. It feels right. It resonates with me. But did you comprehend it? Were you able to grasp the meaning of what you're now saying you'll stand under? Or what we'll say we will stand under. And so that's why I call it spellcraft and language, because we do intend to be a species of integrity, of honor. Understanding tries to, the concept of to understand is to try and trap one in their in that comprehension. In other words, it's not fluid. You need to stand under that. And then if you move, it's like, oh, your integrity's been compromised, as opposed to, oh, I have a few more facts have come in. I've had a chance to really pore over it, and I see a hole in the argument. I comprehend what was said, and it's clear to me that this argument doesn't work out very well. So I can't understand it. I can't stand under it. Doesn't protect me from the rain. It has too many holes. So there is this constant and the English language is the language of the angels. And that to me just means it's the language of pure fuckery. And the more I start to examine word roots and then the constant homonyms. The homonyms are one of the big places where fuckery occurs. And the dual use letters in English. Let's take the letter C. To me, the letter C should be pronounced key. In the Futhark, the Elder Futhark, before the Anglo-Saxon, which is where the English stuff starts to come in with their unnecessary letters. In the Elder Futhark, what looks like a C and is pronounced Ken or Kano. It has a K sound. And then you have, I guess it's Sowellos for the S sound. So you have a K sound in the key. I won't say C because it doesn't make sense to me. But the letters we call C. And then you have the sibilant sound from the S. Who needs a K? Well, you need a K if you're going to take a letter and make it ambiguous, like they did to C. You know, okay, a real classic example of that, of English fuckery, is the word circle. It starts off with a sibilant C, but the second C has a sound of K. Or actually, it has the sound of the original C. So there's, so in other words, to me, it should be A, B, key, D, E, F, G. There's our other fucked with letter. In the runes, in the Elder Futhark, the G sound was what we now call the letter G. They had a J sound in their rune Jera. So again, who needs, you know, you already have letters for a G sound and a J sound. What we're seeing in putting together the language of the angels is confusion. It's confusing the languages. It's the big Tower of Babel type of moment. A, B, K, D, E, F, G. And so we can, the J is useful. The K, we don't need a K. The K was added. It's not part of the original Futhark. It's in the Anglo-Saxon Futhark, when the Futhark went from 24 to 33 letters. Some of them being diphthongs, vowel combinations. But the whole thing of, having to confuse, and it's meant to confuse, because letters are sounds. Sounds are how we create vibrations. Those vibrations are part of how we interact magically. It's part of our power. And one of the ways you screw with people's power is you screw with how they understand how to speak to the environment. Similarly, there's our vowels. In Spanish, the vowels are a, e, o, u. Okay. There, so, you know, there's the of a, the a of what we call e, the e of what we call I, o and u are self-explanatory. And it's interesting when I look at, you know, the English alphabet. So again, you know, we get A, B, the messed with C, which would, you know, to me should probably be a key. D. Then we got E, which another, all, you know, the original languages out of Latin would be A. Hey, any among us. And then I is E. So you can see like there's this transplanting of the original vowels. And there's a couple of sounds, and the Latin is laden with a sound that is the equivalent of lead. And that is the sound like in duh. And interestingly, the Latin word for lead is plumbum, a doubling up of the sound. Let's just let's just kind of run through the alphabet with the sound of and we'll use We have bum, come, which is kind of an order, dumb, fum, like in fumble, gum, hum, but also humble, hum, okay, jum, come again because of the fuckery, lum, mum, saying nothing, numb, feeling nothing, rum, spirits, some, tum, like in tumble. So I get, you know, there are sounds that in the case of again, it's like dumb, you know, it's a deadening sound. Yeah, jum and jumble, right. And so when you look at that especially with the M, and I mean, we could, you know, I don't want to make endless examples. Please feel free to use the chat to do the same thing with other, you know, like, you know, whether it's, you know, with U and another letter, like the M with T, but, cut, dut, fut, you know, again, some of them don't mean anything, gut, hut, jut, again, cut, lut, nut, mutt, put, rut. So tut, as in tut tut. I mean, there's a deadness to the sound, and it's connected with a lot of words that are, you know, not particularly pleasant. And you don't have those sounds in certain languages. And it's kind of the sound of what is known as the schwa. which is, at least in the old dictionaries, then now they have new pronunciation things. I knew the old ones. A schwa was an upside down E, the sound you get in the. In other words, if you saw the, you'd have a, the TH, and then you would have an upside down E. Schwa is a. Language is really important because when we started using language instead of transmitting to each other telepathically, and I really believe the telepathic period of the human species wasn't that long ago. I believe telepathy shut down really rapidly when the monotheisms came in with their laws, where what you thought could get you executed. It wasn't what you did. It was what it was if you thought the wrong thing. So it was, by shutting down telepathy, if you didn't say what you really thought, you might make it through the benevolent heavenly imposition of divine law. And since the imposition of the monotheisms is not, it's not even as long ago as history tells us. It's one of the reasons why trying to get a real chronology and when this fuckery started would be illuminating for many people, because it's just, it's been here forever and ever and ever. No, it hasn't. It actually has a short run. This is a relatively short run in the history of the human species on this wonderful, beautiful earth. And I think it was last week, to me, in the Anunnaki story, we are reading about the creation, not of the human species, of a mockery of the human animal that would be dumb, not know where it came from, and being as they had a hand in its creation, they could tell it any number of things, was not connected to the earth. And of course, they had to borrow the genome. They didn't create this thing out. That type of creation doesn't happen from the ground up. It's all borrowing, mimicking, fucking it with it. Yes, heaven forbid we speak about what we think or feel. Heaven did forbid it, and that's when telepathy had to end. The end of telepathy was a self-preservation move, in my opinion. Preserving ourselves from the blessings of heaven. Hello, Constance. So comprehension instead of understanding. Understanding is a form of obeying. Comprehending is grasping or apprehending an abstract, a line of thought, put in words to you that you pick up. And I know with when I'm sitting in council with some of my peeps, and some of those peeps are here, and when we sit in council, very often we just need to use enough language to create the space that the idea is coming to us from, and then the rest of it is apprehended in a way telepathically. It's kind of like the language is the coordinates of where this information is coming from. And then once you get into that stream of information, you're sharing a stream. And so then the person has brought you into a stream that they're drinking from. And the language got you there. And a big part of comprehension is to grasp what has been delivered through language to one, and then be able to get the rest of the information that was not said. Well, it is interesting to follow up on Constance Neal that talking is what the brain damaged, and trauma does create brain damage. And that we sang. When we listen to the way language is used in many in certain languages, there's a lyrical quality. I mean, for me, like as somebody who really poorly understands Spanish, one of my favorite Spanish-speaking nationalities is Colombian. And I've shared that with other Spanish people. And they go, oh, they just so sing-song. It's like, la, 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 la. You know, I've had some people, again, there's little competitions there. But there was almost, I've had, other people who, oh, I love the way the Colombians speak. And other ones like, oh, the Colombians are too busy singing. So it does appear to me that there's evidence in the modern world that there was a song to our language, even when we went from maybe pure song into language. It is important for us to return to our shamanic roots. All of us were given the ability to enter. I mean, we all dream, unless certain drugs can interfere with that dreaming, but doesn't mean that means the dreaming isn't remembered. Not so much that we don't dream. But that dreaming is one of the forms of going into the part of the natural world that we now call supernatural, but it's just that it sits in a different frequency, and those frequencies are higher, so that would be above. The word for above in scientific language is super. So above natural would be supernatural. And I'm hearing more and more people, and because I listen, I like to listen to more philosophical things, and more people seem to be getting that the supernatural is as part of the natural world as anything. It's in there. Natural. Supernatural. But it's natural. And we very quickly, to survive, are going to have to remember our supernatural roots. The originals, not the and that's another word. Look at the word aborigine. Ab means away. So aboriginal means away from the original. So that's why you now hear more and more people call them the origines. I do physical therapy. I'm a medical massage therapist, myology, and so when you pull muscles that pull things towards your body are called adduction. To lift my arm up, away from my body, abduction. That's what AB means. So ab-original means away from original. Now, what kind of fuckery is that? Yes, Constance. And so anyway, the Aborigines of Australia, and I'm talking about the ones who've pretty much gone into the interior. I mean, the Aborigines originally lived on the coasts. They lived, you know, the interior was always a rather hostile environment, so they weren't stupid. They were profoundly wise. They lived where living was good until the Europeans arrived. And then they found that there wasn't going to be any getting along. And so, yeah, Aborigine, calling them the Aborigines is just again, a way of hiding and a way of you know, insulting them. But the Aborigines, the Aborigines of Australia have have held probably at least the most presenced, I'll say, interpretation of the dream time. The dreaming, where the reality in our waking state derives from. It is the spring, so to speak, the aquifer. The dream time and the dreaming represents the form almost like an aquifer that then through springs emerges into our waking world. It is, I might be jumping, but since Constance is putting some good stuff in there, the form of agriculture that the Aborigines used was talking to nature. They had a relationship with nature. So they were able to use a form of agriculture that was about letting nature know what they wanted. And then nature is saying, well, if you want that, you're going to need to take this flower and sprinkle some of the pollen of that flower on this flower, and then you're going to have what you want. The dreaming is more real than our waking world because it's the waking, but the waking world, right now, the waking world is so fractured from the dream time. And they used it once, you know, it's almost like the dream time is like being in the aquifer, and then the waking in a natural setting. What you could come out and be at the spring and enjoy the water when you were thirsty. There's a beautiful interplay between our waking consciousness and our dreaming consciousness if we're left alone. If we're left to be on the planet within nature as we emerged from it, and to be able to commune with nature without nature dismissing, or in many cases nature hating, heavenly beings interceding. And once again, if you notice, these sky-based ideologies were not adapted without the threat of violence and death. It wasn't like they won the idea war. They lost it. They won the war. They won the heads rolling off of bodies war. They didn't have good arguments. They didn't have good logic or reason. It was unnatural to natural people. You've mentioned 3 different people I've never heard of, Constance. Why don't you speak for yourself? Why don't you speak in your own language, like, you know, because that's, you know, that means that you've comprehended what they've shared, and now it's yours. It's not Matthew Walker's, it's not Bruce Pascoe's, it's Constant Neal. And I think that would work for us all to be, you know, yes, you know, and it's good, I guess, you know, to pay homage I pay homage to John Lamb Lash for bringing the Sophianic narrative, because it was the Sophianic narrative that once I took it on, and entered that dreaming, then I could have gnosis. Gnosis derived from having returned to my roots, which I think is all of our roots. Oh, okay, Constance. I was trying to empower you. Well, Sunshine, that's one of the reasons why, when with the indigenous people here, the original Americans, why their children were taken away from them and sent to Christian boarding schools. They were taken at very young ages so they could have programming. Thank you, Constance. Love you too. And so there's a few more people here. I greeted the early arrivals warmly. I'd like to greet everyone here very warmly and with great love, for us to share together. That's what the live chat's about. It's for sharing, so that as I put ideas out, other ideas can jump on, add to, added value. Yeah, I would say I wrong-headedly wanted Constance to stand in her power without, and I do say wrong-headedly, because, there is a thing where we celebritize people, and again, but there's a fine line between celebritizing and acknowledging people for the work that they've done and put out there. And to me, acknowledging people is kind of like what I would call the human animal's way of copyright. We're just simply that person is where we got it, and who knows even if they were the original. But where we just kind of we're celebrating each other. So anyway, I was a little wrong-headed on that one, meaning to do well, but that's why they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so I'm just admitting to the correction to myself. There was a little error in my statement. And that's the other kind of dreaming language I would consider human animal language, where we have error and correction. And anybody who's in error should want correction. And it doesn't matter if it's in public. And it's not like you should have to pull somebody aside to correct them. To me, our dignity is preserved by showing that when we're in error, we can own that and then accept the correction and just move on. That's where then we have honor and integrity. If we have to be pulled aside and whispered to, oh, by the way, I didn't want to embarrass you, then that shows you're a little bit of a snowflake. That would make me a bit of a snowflake. And we need to be a little hardier than that, I believe. We are the offspring of the aeons. There's nothing snowflakey about an aeon. Thank you, Constance. So when we come into the modern world, so we have the degradation of original people and the earth and nature loving way of life. I won't call it religion. and then the women and the power, and like, you know, when you hear Chief Oren Lion say how that, you know, it's funny, the alchemy he spoke of, you know, like women were in charge of the water and planting in the earth. Earth was recognized by them as feminine. They recognize, whether they called her Sophia or any other appellations, they acknowledged the earth was feminine. And what did men do? Well, men were fire keepers, because there's the alchemy of fire, and, you know, genderizing, and just generally tried to make themselves useful. Of course, they hunted, and they would, you know, work with stone later on when, you know, later on when metal came. But when you look at many of the obsidian and flint, like spearheads and arrowheads, they were more than sufficient to the task. It was hardly like, oh, they were backwards, they were only using flint and obsidian. They've actually done, I've read things where they've experimented with the kind of cut that you could make with let's say, an obsidian scalpel versus a stainless steel scalpel. And the beauty is, not only does the obsidian scalpel cut as well, but it tends to cut in a way that leaves you would need at least a magnifying glass or some high magnification to see that these cuts are not linearly, with obsidian, are not linearly clean the way a metal scalpel cuts. There's just a little bit of raggedness in the cut, a little bit of unevenness, and they found out that skin knits better when there is kind of like these little adjoining pieces, rather than just two clean sides to have to join. That in many ways, that not only does obsidian cut as well as a metal scalpel, but the wound will close sooner, because the nature of the cut is just more amenable to how the body will mend itself. So, you know, the whole idea that there was a primitiveness about the use of things that didn't, you know, when you're working with stone, you don't need to cut down trees to run this really hot furnace to melt things. I am not saying metallurgy is bad. Not even trying to. Again, there's just the judgment of like just how, I don't know, like almost ape-like the Stone Age way of living was, and sort of the brilliance, the simplicity and brilliance of people living in a way that allowed them to, you know, get what they needed from nature and not have to overuse nature to get their basic concepts. Trees, you know, the other thing about all original people, the earth was alive. One of the things that that was beautiful about what Chief Oren Lion said, was that everything was a relative. The wind was your relative. The river was your relative. The coyote was your relative. The buffalo, these were relatives. You were related to these forces and these other beings. And so when you needed something from one of your relatives, you did it, you know, from a place of, you know, thank you, of being thankful, and also thoughtful that you were using it for a reason that they could understand, that helped us out. To have to cut down trees to create the kind of temperatures to indulge in metallurgy, you at least want to make sure that if you're going to do that, that you're doing it to feed yourselves, ourselves. You know, we're doing it to, you know, for hoes, for shovels, for wheels to move, not for swords and spears and shields. Let's see now here. So I want to see if I get to my, okay. I'm going to see if I can find that Oren Lyons. Here, oh, I found it already. Good. All right. It's an hour and 11 minutes. And he is, what I have to say, he's gentle. He understands that he needs to get a point across, and that point will best get across if it's not done in an attacking manner. He shows great wisdom and in what he's doing. He understands that he comprehends that you'll get more bees with honey than vinegar. Clear my throat. Where's my mic? Mute. 1 second. That's better. I recommend listening to Chief Oren. He's very well spoken. He's very much a part of the modern Native American life, in that, you know, he's surrounded by it. You know, their country was taken over. Their country was invaded. Funny thing is, you know, the Pilgrims and Puritans, they were not well liked in Europe. I think I mentioned that last time. I'm quite sure they probably had people help them build their boats. Get out of here, you bunch of crazy cultists. As if you know, the ones who were helping them build were a whole lot better. It was just shit of a different smell. I mean, just to you know, when you think, and the other thing. Okay, let me get back to our timeline. I'm all over the place here. Anatoly Fomenko, and who was it? Who was I listening to last night? Where was it? Oh, really good. Oh, was it old? This guy's name is Jason. That was his YouTube. And the first half was Cliff High, and the second half was Sylvie Ivanova, who has the New Earth series. Hello, Vernon. There you go, meandering. Thank you. It's interesting. He's a faith keeper of the Turtle Clan, but he personally, the Turtle Clan's a bigger clan. He personally is part of the Wolf Clan, which is why he's a teacher. And he said it kind of Haudenosaunee, so apparently that S is the S. And the Haudenosaunee means people of the Longhouse. And I think it's funny because the word Shawnee looks a little bit like sauna. And they did sweats, but they did them in the Longhouse. In other words, their form of doing a sweat was more like a sauna than the womb-like experience of the Inipi. Yes, Fox Dre, that's exactly what I was getting at. Because the Pilgrims were Puritans. And they were not well liked. I mean, you know, and they were part of the Protestant Reformation. And one of the things that Sylvia didn't get in, she gets into it in some of her things. The Reformation that took place in Germany, with the assistance of the Gutenberg printing press, the fake news, where fake news got its start, cannot be overestimated. And it was the printing press and the new chronology that they were able to reproduce by thousands of books that enabled them to paper over our story with their history. And again, when we go from the collective our to the individual my, our story at the individual level is my story. My story was turned from the historians into mystery. Mystery is our story. That's why how this happened was a mystery. Then you have, like the Eleusinian mysteries. What they were doing, those mysteries were keeping our story. So mystery is our story. History is their story. The victors, the ones who thought weapons were more important than agricultural tools, and that the use of those weapons to spread a belief, an ideology, was not only acceptable, but had to be done. The most witches burned were not by the Inquisition, but it was in the Reformation. And the burning of witches was very much a part of exterminating the mysteries, exterminating those who kept the memory alive of who we are, where we came from, how to live with nature, how to obtain what we need from nature, including how to take care of our health. The Reformation is a pivotal moment, and again with the Gutenberg printing press, pivotal in how we apprehend, which goes with comprehend, how we apprehend, how we seize the world we think we live in based on where we came from. We are not being told where we came from. We're being lied to. The official history lies to us, and then the replacement for the mysteries, religion, are lying to us. Midwifery is an interesting, because the wise woman was central. The wise women were central to every community. Corruptions of what it meant for a woman to enter her menstrual cycle, where you now have taboo tents. You might have heard of some woman who got bit by a snake in India because she was sent to the menstrual hut. The menstrual hut, in many ways, from what I can remember as lives as a woman, was the center of the wise woman. It was all, there might have been a hunt just specifically for that, but there was a general complex that was run by the wise women. And this was everything from sex education to reproductive management, birthing of babies, the allowing women to have like a clean space for your head to go while they were losing blood. And the fact that women were, if you had a community or a tribe, however you identify it, Everybody came from a woman. The wise women knew when every woman of the community was due. And if somebody was late for their menstrual cycle, the wise women knew, well, either we have a little bit of a health issue or somebody is pregnant. The wise women knew how to either assist in the care during the pregnancy till delivery or how to end pregnancies. A big part of, in many ways, they oversaw the wisdom of our own breeding. So a woman is supposed to be in the menstrual tent. She's not there, especially a young woman. The wise woman would be, you're not on your moon cycle. Are you ill, or did you lie with somebody? And they might go, yeah, I laid with that one. Trust me, they would check out who that male was, and whether or not they. And again, they didn't have all say, but they had some. They had, they had the respect, and considering the family that the woman came from and who she might have got pregnant with, they might say, nah, that's not good. That's not good for the tribe. That's not good for the community. That's bad breeding. And they had ways of ending pregnancies through herbs. There were acupuncture points, acupressure points, essential oils if they had them, but there were the herbs. There were abortifacients. They were part of the quality control, because when young men and young women first come into breeding age, a lot of times there's more hormones than sense. And the wise women were looking at the longevity, the future, the next generations that were to come. And they oversaw. You could, and the word eugenics, because of who practiced it, is an ugly word right now. But again, the modern eugenics is the archontic, dark, creepy form of managing ourselves. In the natural world, we see this management. You might see a male try to mount a certain female in a case where she doesn't have a male protecting her. The female animal might allow it, or they might also just walk away. And the male does multiple mountings, but she doesn't allow the penetration because she has rejected that gene pool. Nature has, again, so eugenics, meaning good or improvement of the genes. The eugenics that we hear about were not eugenics in any natural sense. In a Frankenstein sense, in an archontic ruler type of sense, yes, but not in any kind of thing. But the wise women were part of good breeding or good gene passage. Right, very good, Jasmine. Exactly. This now, and so we can kind of, the whole problem, and one of the problems with by saying, oh, gee, what you're saying sounds like eugenics. No. Eugenics is fuckery. But thinking about the generations to come, thinking about that one particular clan might have been visited by some disasters, and breeding women or men were compromised. And therefore, well, just let's see now, this clan is being hurt. Well, let's look and see into the other clans where maybe somebody had already done some blending with another clan, and we can find somebody who's at least half of this clan we're trying to reconstitute and preserve. It is from the Native Americans we get the concept of thinking 7 generations ahead. But when they're saying thinking 7 generations ahead, yes, you are thinking, but you're acting in the current generation. You only have agency on the future generations in the present generation. genes, generation, genetics. It's all part of the same continuum, part of the same concept. We need our wise women. It's very difficult to have wise women in a world where the ideologies are heaven-based. It's hard to have wise men unless they're also earth-based. We have to come back to Mama, to Mother Nature, where we come from, where our sustenance. I mean, people could, the whole city thing is an illusion. It's an illusion because there would be nothing on the shelves if there wasn't still a nature to pull things from. If there weren't rivers to pull fish from and oceans to pull fish from. And those resources are dying out because people who've left nature are unaware that nature is losing its ability to sustain us. We will never kill the earth. We will just kill the ability for it to take care of us. In which case, natural selection would deselect the human animal, because the human animal made the environment unfit. And it's about pollution. We can live through ice ages, we can live through hot periods. We can't live with the pollution. This is not about CO2. This is about bisphenol A. This is about, petrochemicals in water. It's about particulates that come out of exhausts, that come out of factory smokestacks. It's about what makes, air unbreathable, water undrinkable. Carbon dioxide does neither. This whole propaganda about CO2 is an archontic agenda. The ice age, the ending of the ice age, that also came and then once weather warms up, once the temperature warms up, it can support CO2. That's the other thing that the real science is. Higher temperatures allow for more CO2. Higher temperatures also allow for more green. Everything green on this planet wants CO2 because there's a symbiosis going there. Increased CO2 means increased output of agriculture. Trees grow faster. They'll struggle less to stay alive. The natural inclination for us to care for the earth has been infiltrated, and again, some people can only apprehend things emotionally. Fine, but they've been given wrong data to react to emotionally. And that's one of the things that I think really needs repair, is that we do need to care for the environment, and CO2 is not an issue. Once again, more CO2 would really, with all the, and that's the other thing, they talk about, we must reduce CO2 while they clear-cut forests. This shows you that they're lying, because if CO2 was so crucial, they would realize that those forests better stay up. If we're on a knife edge with CO2 emissions, then they wouldn't be cutting down trees, would they? The reason they're doing it is because they're full of shit on all lines. This is bullshit science. And another person to check out to really, really get us connected into some good deep earth concepts is Paul Stamets. He's the mushroom guy. And he is far more useful in how fungi and mycorrhiza, the kind of network of the ground. He's much more about that. I mean, sure, he loves himself some magic mushrooms, but that's not the focus of his work. The magic mushrooms are one of the tools that might get people to think, to reconnect to the earth. But the mushrooms and fungi play a far more important, a much more important role, a foundational role in life on the earth, than just being able to contact the dreaming. Hello, expanding the process. Thank you for joining us. And so we have movements. We have the ecology movement fed by bad science. Then we have a feminist movement that doesn't realize that the main thing that has to go if they're going to change the world is to get rid of the ball-bearing god religions. Their downfall came with those religions. That's the seed. Oh, the patriarchy. Fine, there is a problem with patriarchy, and things do need to be restored. And religion is the place to start. Do you belong to one of those religions while you scream about the patriarchy? Hypocrisy much? Cognitive dissonance much? And you got my vote. Patriarchy is a horrible thing on this planet. And it all starts in heaven. You want the matriarchy back? Get back to earth. Get back to wisdom. It's very interesting how the name that the Gnostics chose for Mother Earth was Sophia, which is just the Greek word for wisdom. It's not, you can think of it as a proper name, but it means wisdom. So we need to return to wisdom if we want to live sane lives. The world is set up for want. The world has been set up. The rulers want there to be contrived lack because it helps the control. And that's why this private land ownership. Because if somebody owns land, they can say, oh, you can't, I'm going to grow some food, feed a whole bunch of people. You can't do that on my land. Well, why don't you grow some food? I'm not in the mood. That's one of the things in the video I dropped in there with Oren Lyons. He speaks about this bizarre concept of owning land. I mean, each land has their people on it, but the land is a relation. You have a relationship with the earth. And different people arise on different places on this earth. And there's variance in the genes. A lot of it having to do with adaptability, and I think also sometimes it's just the mama playing with different ways of doing things, bringing different vibrational focuses. I know that one of the things that I enjoy as a European with some Native American blood, about running into, African Americans, there is a different vibration there at the genetic level, and it's deep, it's profound, and again, amongst just regular human animals of different things. I'm not talking about the knuckleheads that every single genetic strain has. When you get away from the knuckleheads, there is this richness of this genetic diversity, and And it's all there. Like, there is a beauty that comes out of my experience of the African soul, the African genetics. And as a musician, I very much appreciate it. And then, you know, I look at Oren Lyons, a Native American, and there is another, you know, again, there is a, you know, this slightly different genetic part of the human animal. Again, I'm not going to use the word race. I disavow a word that implies competition. We can compete within our own gene pools of bring the goods and then show them off. It's not a competition. It's just a sense of, you know, honor and integrity. Yeah, Republic, you know, the Republic is based on Rome, and Rome is not, has no, Rome, we're held up, this great example of Rome, but who's holding it up for us to admire? Them and the historians. The Republic is little more than a fiction to hold laws. It's a fiction to hold the legal system. Basically, it's a repository for Torah instead of Tao or Tao, for law instead of way. And that's another, there's another one. I mean, like, you'll hear, and you know, you'll hear some original people, and they'll speak of their laws. The word law is an English word. Be very interesting in what the original word they used was and what it really meant. And I'm quite sure it was more like ways, agreements, that could then maybe be called rules. But it's one thing to have rules, and it's another thing to have rulers. Rules are things we can develop amongst ourselves. Rulers are unnatural. Leaders are not rulers. We always have had our leaders, but they weren't rulers, and they represented the best we had. Thank you, expanding the process. Well, again, but even when, once again, we know that's our, you know, we have translations of other words, and like, oh, the closest thing in our language to that word is law. So we say that word means law, but is that really what it meant? And then if it does mean law, when did that, you know, when in the timeline did it enter? Because as I've mentioned before, that word law creeps, with emphasis on the word creep, creeps into our understanding in very pernicious and toxic ways. And I've used this example before, but I'll never tire of it. We can take, quote unquote, the laws of thermodynamics. They're not laws. They're observations by observers of how heat works. We could just as easily and properly say the first observation of thermodynamics is, and then it would be what we now call the first law of thermodynamics. And then you have your second law. But correctly, what we're doing is we're looking at how the cosmos, how reality works at the subatomic level or at the homeostatic level. So we are observing. So the first from where our seat, the first observation of how heat behaves is this way. The second observation, or the way heat behaves, the Tao. The second way that heat behaves is this. And the third way, right now we call it the first law of thermodynamics, the second law, blah, 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 blah. That's a way to insert law. This is a way they can take their legal system and put it even into the way, and it makes it look like the whole universe is built on a legal system rather than the way, or the Tao, or the way, the intelligence and the homeostasis and the play that we see symbolized in the yin-yang symbol. You know, Fox or Dre, that's why there were quote-unquote tribal lands. It was kind of understood that a people came with a land. They were stewards of that land. And if some other people from another land thought they should be there, well, first of all, they're going to have to enter into discussions. And maybe something can be worked out. Unless they just thought they could come in with their weapons and take it over, in which case the people of the land, because it's where they lived, it was their environment, might have to mount a defense response or give up that land. But nobody owned anything. How do you own? It's like owning the air. I mean, when you break it down to alchemy, how do you own fire? How do you own air? Now, you have if there are small bodies, bodies of water and rivers, and that's where you get into water rights. So because it's there, and it's interesting that the male parts of alchemy, fire and air, are not so easy to own. Where water, because there are, you can have lakes, you can have springs, whatever, and then land. But again, these are elements. These are the elements. How do you own elements? Once again, owning land is like owning fire or owning air at the alchemical level. And when we look at it alchemically, we see the fuckery. When we used to move about, basically in our ancestral lands. It seems that there were certain people who, of lesser skill and of living on the land, who rather than developing skills or dying out, which might have been proper for them, were taught metallurgy skills, how to build weapons, and let's, hey, why do all this? We'll go there. And then they set themselves up as rulers. And then they have the peasants continuing to work the land while they steal from them, basically. Like Native American tribes, often, during the summer, they would go into higher elevations where it wasn't as oppressive. And then during the winters, they would go into places that were more insulated, especially from north winds. But they had their summer and their winter lands. Again, the people had lands, but they didn't own it. They were part of it. Just like a river cutting through a certain piece of land. They were as much a part of the land as the river that flowed through it. We were part and parcel of nature. Not a part, but part. A part of nature. So anyway, that was kind of I wanted to go off on language a little bit, because language is and our story. What now is hidden, my story, the individual our story, hidden as mysteries. And then the nonsense of most of history. History will definitely be built on some truth, but that truth gets moved around like pieces on a chessboard, especially with regard to chronologies. Oh, Davey's here? I didn't see Davey. Hello, Davey. So anyway, that's about, I think that's going to be it for this Telestic transmission. I was glad to see some another Telestite join us tonight that I hadn't seen before, and I do believe that was Constance. As much as that sometimes I feel a little frustrated, and a lot of the frustration actually gets dissipated once I do my streams and engage with the beautiful minds. Oh, hi. Okay, Davey, thank you. Engage with, the beautiful minds that show up in the live stream here. Very often, what makes me drag myself into a stream is I've been paying attention to too many other live streams, although more and more, like I'm really enjoying the X series by Dark Journalist, and I don't care if he wears the same fucking suit all the time. Don't care. But I'm enjoying that series because there's some nuggets in there, and it's not like swimming through a cesspool to find that the diamond rings have been flushed. It's relatively benign in its overall thing with some really good stuff, which I find interesting. But I have to shut off his live stream. Really part of the two things I would benefit most from to keep my energy up is not read live streams except my own, and not read comments except my own. Yeah, I fell asleep during his last one, which was beautiful because I needed some sleep. So I got up and I go, okay, I think the last thing I remember he was doing this. And yeah, Steiner is, the interesting thing, I mean, especially since I speak about John Lamb Lash a lot, before he got to Terma and before he really started going off, coming home, he was steeped in Steiner's work. Steeped in it. Steiner was a very intelligent, he was a really good guy. But he came out of Theosophy. And Theosophy, for me, got a little bit stuck on this ascended master crap. And to his credit, Krishnamurti, who had been chosen by the Theosophist, Annie Besant, and I don't know whether it was Ledbetter or some of the other guys that were involved. When he realized, because they picked him as a young boy. When he became old enough and they were going to crown him, king, so he went, take a walk. This is wrong-headed. And so for me, the fact that and then Krishnamurti went on to to spread his brilliance and wisdom, usually in a Socratic kind of method, where he would engage people and then he would ask them questions about what they just said. Kind of the Socratic method, getting back to philosophy, the love of wisdom. And but to me, the person that they self-chose to represent what they thought was good was the one who said, no, this ascended master stuff is silly. This is goofy, and this is riding on the ugly wave of that we don't have the wisdom right here on earth, that we need somebody with special appointments from some heavenly or a higher sphere. And we see some of that higher sphere and silliness in the Nag Hammadi texts themselves, which is why extracting the real narrative was quite a labor that John Lamb Lash pulled off. So anyway, and thank you, Windsor, for the thank you. And so anyway, it's good for me to interact with the people in the chat and with the other Telesti, and the non-Telesti, because the non-Telesti come in and they bring in good energy. They really do. It's a good communing, and I'm very pleased with it. So that's what I'm going to do next time. I'm kind of getting ready. I'm going, oh my God, to remember who shows up in this chat and forget about all the other chats that I read. because they really, it's like, oh man, what, you know, what's the point? And then I come in here and I see the beautiful discussions that happen here, and I go, that's the point. And so thank you to the people who showed up live, and to remind me of how important what we're doing here, how that it has meaning, and that perhaps purpose can be derived from it. And what's always in, like last week when I closed down a show, I'd already, you know, it's interesting to close down a show and you know you already have 3 thumbs down, and I'm the kind of person where if I know I'm not going to like what somebody's saying, I don't go there. I'm at the most, and I try to I keep thumbs down to a real minimum. If I know that somebody's going to say something that I don't agree with, I'm not going to spend my time doing that, and I'm certainly not going to act like an impotent you know, person by, you know, putting an anonymous thumbs down on somebody's video. That makes me feel that's just too low. But you know, people with that, when one does not really have a sense of self-worth, sometimes doing something a little on a dicky side makes them feel like that they are someone. So I guess that's just part of the deal. So let me finish saying goodnight. And anyway, now I extended a warm greetings, and I would like to now extend a warm departing until next time. And treat yourselves well. Reconnect to Mother Nature. And we'll do this again next week. And my love to you all. And seek wisdom. Knowledge can help the wisdom, but the whole purpose of knowledge is to assemble it into wisdom, in my opinion. So that will be it. And I'm going to stop streaming now.